بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا ونبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا. We have reached كتاب الإدة Mukhtasar Quduri, and what is the Idda? The waiting period. Idda, the Arabic language, is from ihsa, is from enumerating something, and the idea being that this is a defined period of waiting before which the woman cannot remarry, and so it's defined shar'an, as Alam al-Maydani mentions. تربص يلزم المرأة عند زوال النكاح. It is a period of waiting that is required for the woman when the marriage is lifted. عند زوال النكاح أو شبهته. عند زوال شبهته, or that which is شبهة النكاح. That was akin to a nikah, such as if they engaged in a marriage ceremony, they had a nikah, but it did not result, but the conditions were not fulfilled, right? And there's a few other scenarios of the shubhat nikah, which we'll come to. There are a number of wisdoms related to the idda, right? Now, the idda is legally legally required ta'abbudan, right? There's rulings that are ma'qul al-ma'na, right? That the ruling revolves around the legal reason, a discernible legal reason of clear interest. Here, there is an aspect that is ma'qul al-ma'na insofar as we can discern wisdoms for the idda. But it's ta'abbudi insofar as there are many cases where those meanings do not arise. As we'll see, two people got married, they had a khilwa sahiha, they had no intercourse, they're two upright people, the idda is still due, even though the primary reason for it is not manifest. Because there's a number of wisdoms, so that it does not revolve around just a discernible worldly benefit or harm, right? They mentioned 4 or more wisdoms for the idda. One is istibra'u rahim al-mar'a, for the woman's, to ensure that there is no pregnancy, right? So that, because if she got married to someone else right away, then there would be confusion as to whose child that is. That's number 1. Number 2 is لإمكان الاستدراك, to give the possibility of coming back together. Right? Because often people hasten to end marriage and they regret, etc. So this gives a time of possibility. Which is especially given the significance of marriage and the benefits of marriage and the harms of the term of ending marriage generally. This is a matter of consideration. So that was number what? 2. Number 3 is, they say, إظهارا لأهمية الزواج. Is to manifest the importance of marriage. This is a matter of significance, not only for the two parties, Because during the idda is inconvenient. The idda is inconvenient for the woman, but also for the man. The woman is limited in some of her worldly activities and so on, but also the basis of the idda is that the idda is in the marital home. Now most people only have one home. So for the man to either be able to, if you uphold the rulings of the idda, he has to somehow navigate either being able to use the same home, or he has to live elsewhere, depending on the case. So that's a burden on him as well. Right? And also for others, the family see that, look at the consequence of a marriage not working, so it serves as a reminder for them on how to approach marriage and the seriousness of it. And related to that, of course, there's a maslahah related to the two parties specifically, which is related to the previous one, which is so that they may have islah al-tasarruf, right? They may rectify their conduct moving forward. And you see very frequently people whose marriages ended up in divorce, who spent time to look at what went wrong, etc. Their next marriages were significantly better, for example. So these are a few of the wisdoms behind it. But there's a janib ta'abbudi in it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has commanded regarding it. We will share something that's very useful, and it's a good practice. You know, we're not looking at proofs and so on, because that's beyond the scope of something like this. But they are central. You know, one of the beautiful works by a modern scholar is Shaykh Muhammad Ali al-Sabuni's work on Ahkam al-Quran. It's called Rawa'i' al-Bayan. Shaykh Muhammad Ali al-Sabuni is arguably the most notable living scholar of tafsir, and wrote accessible to tafsir, but a solid alim, and deeply versed in the classical tafsir. He's done many works on tafsir, very notable ones. But with that, this looks at key sets of verses related to legal rulings. So we'll share with some of the rulings related to the idda, and he goes into understanding the rulings and the verses themselves, but also he gives the context of the wisdom of the tashri'ah and so on, the wisdom of legislation, and that's very beautiful. And it's important in our times to be able to contextualize. Now, another reality, of course, that exists is that ikhtilaf within Islam is rahmah. And ikhtilaf within the da'irat Ahl Sunnah, within the framework of Ahl Sunnah, is mercy. Right? And in general, the guiding principle when it comes to looking for dispensations is the governing principle that إِذَا ضَاقَ الْأَمْرِ اتَّسَعَ. Right? When matters become constrained, rulings do become more expansive, and one has to look at that. Right? And a number of the rulings, and we'll be coming to them in the text, a number of the rulings on the idda are difficult for people for a number of reasons. Number one, the influence of the times we're in, with this idea of, of the attempted wiping away of gender roles and expectations, right? Of the husband's role being the provider and the woman's role being to be the the woman's domain above all being her home, right? And it's not exclusive. The husband's supposed to help at home, and the wife may work, she may have some public participation, but in terms of whose primary responsibility is what. So much so that just last week in the UK, they banned an ad for for a large automotive company. Why? Because it had a picture of a woman sitting next to a pram. About the idea was feeling safe in this particular type of German car. That it prohibited gender stereotyping. That the fact that you're showing a mother with her child is gender stereotyping. And there's another ad that was banned. That was a bit, frankly, tasteless as well. Nothing haram about it. So a lot of Muslims are raised in that context. It's very alien to them to be able to stay at home. Okay, number one. Number two, with part of the times we're in, the breakdown of extended families, right? And communities of extended families, neighborhood living, and community living. And these are three circles of support. Which is a nuclear family is inefficient insofar as you now lose these circles of support. Of course, it's economically more advantageous because, if you don't have food, you just go visit, your brother who lives next door, they'll feed you. Instead, but there's no economic activity that's measured by that. But if you call a Khandash to deliver your food, you're helping the economy, right? And that's why, there's a Harvard economist wrote a book on, fascinating book on why modern economics hurts individuals, families, communities, and society. So this kind of thinking. Now, one is beneficial economic activity to get food delivered so you can eat on your own, but just going to your neighbor or going to your brother or your parents is not economic activity. It's not measurable. So in one sense, you're hurting the economy by doing that. No, but you're helping humanity because you're creating bonds, right? But with the breakdown of extended family, of neighborhood, of community, for a woman to be alone at home is very difficult, because then she does not have support for herself, socially, emotionally, right? Spiritually. She's just alone. And if she has children, she doesn't have practical support with the children. She's just her and a few small kids. And then living alone, there's no one who will take care of your worldly needs. Right? Whereas if people are living in extended family, neighborhood, community, people pitch in with each other. Someone got divorced, someone will do the shopping, someone will do this, people will come and visit, etc. So it's a very different dynamic, right? And then most women, just part of the way the economies are structured and the aforementioned things, that most women are in a situation where they are economically in need of working. Right? So to say that you have to stay home, you can't work, it makes a lot of things very complicated. So in there are people who are able to uphold these rules. One, because of their circumstances, or number two, because of their religious commitment. This is the azima, and this is the higher resolve. Okay? Imam Abdul Wahhab al-Sha'rani has a wondrous book called Al-Mizan al-Kubra. And I don't recommend it for students of knowledge when we're starting off, but it's an amazing thing. He looks at the four schools with a greater scale. looking at what are the positions of higher resolve and where are the dispensations, right? So that one can, where one is able to take the higher resolve, that is more pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But there are also dispensations, okay? And we don't view a particular madhab that this is a method of acting, a method of transmitting the religion, but this is not the religion. The haqiqah shari'iyya, the shari'i reality that Allah and His Messenger have come with, encompasses the interpretive possibilities contained within the Sunni mainstream. The mahajjat al-bayda, the wide way that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has come with, encompasses that which is within the accepted framework of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. We need to respect that. So we have, these are like lanes. You drive in your own lane. You don't zigzag because you're going to get run over. Okay? But at the same time, we don't say that my lane is the only part of the highway. And there's some times where, like if you're in the high occupancy lane, you cannot leave your lane. And there are rules to changing lanes. If there's oncoming traffic, you can't switch lanes. Sometimes the right lane must exit. Right? There's rules to changing lanes. It's not a free-for-all. Because if you change lanes and you run someone over, you're culpable. Similarly, but these are lanes within the highway of Ahl Sunnah. That is not all of Ahl Sunnah. So there, we will point you towards the Maliki opinion with respect to Idda. And over the years, I've consulted a number of my teachers who are Hanafis, who even in Muslim countries would often point people when there was a clear need towards the Maliki opinion. Because in the Maliki opinion, there's a lot more leeway for a woman to leave the house with respect to work, with respect to her worldly needs, even with respect to her social needs, which in a large number of cases gives a lot more breathing room for her, right? And also the experience is that if one, if you tighten things too much when people are already finding it, they'll flee. So I tried to explain this to a friend of mine who was a Hanafi, and he advised his sister and her family on how to do the Idda, went into all the nitty-gritty details, and preached caution on top of that. The sister decided to go on vacation for her Idda. So she went on Umrah, and then the Bahamas, and then visiting family, I forget, Canada or the US or whatever. So that was her Idda. Right? So, and I asked one of the Maliki, and I talked to a number of Maliki fuqaha about the rulings that they've mentioned. The Shaykh mentioned it's far better for someone for their conduct to remain within one of the four schools of Sunni Islam than for them to leave anything that is a sound interpretation of the command of Allah and His Messenger. Right? And that's how we view the four methods. These are sound, consistent, interpretive possibilities of the command of Allah and His Messenger. Because we do not intend, when we follow the Hanafi school that I am, it's not obey Allah and obey Abu Hanifa. Right? It's obey Allah, ati'u Allah, ati'u Rasul. Right? How do you make ita'ah of Allah and His Messenger? فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلَ الذِّكْرِ. Ask the people of remembrance. But our intention, okay? Like in doing any particular act, the way we do it is I am following Allah and His Messenger. Right? Someone tried to argue with me, should we just do extra? If you enter the masjid, should we just do extra? Like if we enter the masjid at Maghrib, if people were praying 2 rak'ahs, am I as a Hanafi not missing out? No, because my intention, I am at this moment obeying Allah and His Messenger in a manner that I understand that is a consistent manner of being in a state of obedience to the command of Allah. And by sitting down and waiting, engaging in dhikr, dua, reflection, Quran, and not missing out on anything. Right? This is how the things where we do something or we don't do something. That's how we follow. So the reason this background is important is because this is something that many people struggle with. Right? Right? That many people struggle with. And it is our careful and considered responsibility, in having the amana of ilm, is to convey حدث الناس على قدر عقولهم, address people in a manner that they can understand. Otherwise, Allah and His Messenger, أتحبون أن يكذب الله ورسوله. Do you wish that Allah and His Messenger be denied? And this is one of those things that one has to be careful, and which is why التسرع للفتوى, right? Rushing to give legal verdicts is very dangerous. Very, very dangerous. Very, very dangerous because for obvious reasons, right? That when one's saying this is allowed or this is not allowed, Ibn al-Qayyim has a work on the principles of fatwa called إعلام الموقعين عن رب العالمين, informing those who are signing off on behalf of Allah and His Messenger. That when we say affirm a ruling related to religion, it's like we're saying that I affirm that this is what Allah seeks from you. You're signing off on behalf of the Lord of the worlds. That is serious. وَمَنْ أَظْلَمُ مِمَّنْ افْتَرَى عَلَى اللَّهِ كَذِبًا. Who is a greater wrongdoer than one who makes up a lie against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's levels of lies. Someone who's lying about his divinity, and his attributes and so on. But it's also with respect to his command. The command, someone who does it deliberately is far worse off than someone who does it ignorantly or unaware or over optimistically. But it is a serious matter. So that's a little bit of a background related to Kitab al-Idda, and that some of these rulings are difficult, but that's how we can, there's a framework for approaching it. Inshallah, we can share. We have a few answers, particularly good one by Shaykh Faraz Khan, who consulted, very respected Mauritanian Malikis regarding Idda and its rulings, and I ran it by Shaykh Saad bin Siddina. A few answers related to that on Seekers, so you can look for that, and let's share it. Okay. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قال الإمام القدوري رحمه الله تعالى: إذا طلق الرجل امرأته. If a man divorces his wife طلاقا بائنا أو رجعيا, right? If he divorces her with a طلاق بائن, an irrevocable divorce, or a revocable divorce, رجعي, أو وقعت الفرقة بينهما بغير الطلاق, or a separation is made for them, a legal separation, a furqa, which is when the qadi, the furqa happens on part of the qadi. And there's rulings related to how and what can that happen. You can't just say, okay, I'll terminate it. وهي حرة, and she is free. ممن تحيض, so she is free, and she is still of those who experience حيض. فعدتها ثلاثة أقراء. Her idda is 3 full menstrual periods. والأقراء الحيض, and the qur', right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands ثلاثة قروء. It is this refers to the hayd. And now one thing, if a man divorces his wife, this is after dukhul, after the marriage is consummated. And we'll talk a little about that. If the marriage is actually or effectively consummated, then what is due? If she's still of those who would be legally considered to experience menstruation, her waiting period is 3 quru. Now, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there's difference of opinion, there's difference of usage. In Arabic, the qur is min al-abdad, of the words that have two usages. It's used both for the period of hayd, and it's also used for the period of tuhur. There's difference of opinion amongst the madahib on what is due for hayd, for the idda. 3 menstrual periods or 3 periods of purity. So, according to Imam Abu Hanifa, the specific expressions of the Quran, what's called the khas, are decisive in their indication. Like the specific expressions of the Quran are decisive in their indication. Right? The khas. The khas is an expression that clearly indicates one meaning. And does not indicate others. So such a word is considered to be, number one, decisive. قطعي الدلالة, decisive in its indication. And being decisive in indication, لا يقبل البيان. It does not accept elucidation. I would say لا يحتمل البيان. This is an usuli discussion. If you were to look in, for example, Nur al-Anwar, in the section on the khas, this is explained out. If someone wants to read it, Nur al-Anwar's explanation here of it is very easy. Nur al-Anwar, Sharh al-Manar. But, so where does the khas come in here? The word quru, plural of qur, has two potential meanings. Abu Hanifa says unequivocally it has to mean 3 menstrual periods. Why? Because the word 3 is khas. Okay? The numbers are khas, are specific. What does 3 mean? Okay? Let's say Sidi Zayn is getting married and they didn't feed him at his marriage. Okay? All the excitement, they forgot to feed the groom. Just as in the nasiha, make sure you eat. They forgot to feed me, my wife. So we ordered 2-for-1 pizza at like 1 a.m. at night. Right? It was quite disastrous. And so, see, Hamza says, "Oh, you didn't eat. I'll go grab some food." Right? But I demand payment. Right? So he does it, Khan Dash. You put in an order, you want 3 kulfis. What if they brought you 2.5? Did they fulfill the order? No. You could demand a refund. By bringing 2.5 kulfis, did you do what was requested? 2.75? Does it do the thing? Right? If he brings 3.5 kulfis, all that's rightfully yours is 3. Because the numbers are clear in what they indicate. Okay? And so, especially when you consider in the context of a command, I want 2 thobes cut from this. someone makes you 4 microphones, did they fulfill the command? No. 2 means 2. Okay? So how does that relate to 3 quru? Because the legislated divorce, where does it take place? In a state of tuhur or a state of hayd? Tuhur. It's prohibited, though valid, to divorce during hayd. So if you did the command, if you exercised the divorce in accordance with what has been commanded, you could not do 3 quru. If qur meant purity, why? Because even if you did it when the tuhur, when the time of purity began, it's 3 less a few moments. It's not 3 full quru. Right? So waiting period is necessarily, if the command is for it to be 3, means 3 full. Right? And this is clear in its indication. So therefore we understand that the quru, the word qur here is being used for the times of hayd. Because only the times of hayd could soundly be 3 full periods. Otherwise you'd have to, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is commanding you, wait for 3 full periods. The only way you could fulfill it is by divorcing during hayd. So you can have 3 full periods, but then you're disobeying the divine command. Right? As understood from the teachings of the Prophet, you cannot divorce during hayd, but it counts. So that's why usul al-fiqh, this is just like a little demonstration of the usefulness of usul al-fiqh, that sometimes, but that comes up in, that's one, and of course there's many other lines of argument as well. Okay? That this is, he says, هو الأطراء الحيض عندنا, according to us. Why do they say according to us? Very often when they say something like this, because there's khilaf. Now, at our level right now, we don't necessarily go and look for the khilaf and understand it, but appreciate that. And why would you say عندنا? If something was agreed upon, they wouldn't say عندنا. So it typically indicates that there's khilaf. Right? If it says عند أبي حنيفة, usually would indicate that there's khilaf within the madhab. But it could just be khilaf with the Shafi'is, because the Hanafis and Shafi'is coexisted and were co-argumentative for a long time. But the other reasoning, لأن الحيض لبراءة الرحم. Because what does the hayd do? It is the hayd that makes one know that the rahim is free of pregnancy. Because if someone becomes pregnant, does hayd take place? No. Once pregnancy begins, hayd stops. So this is an indicator of bara'at al-rahim, of the womb being free of pregnancy. bara'at al-rahim ay min al-walad, right? Or min al-haml. وهو المقصود, and that's the purpose, right? Or al-maqsood, it's from the purpose, and the most direct purpose of hayd. وإن كانت لا تحيض من صغر أو كبر فعدتها 3 أشهر. And if she is of those who don't experience hayd, either due to being very young or by reaching an age such that she is too old to experience hayd, and this is called sinnul iyas, right? It's called legal menopause, and legal menopause is beyond, can often be beyond individual person's menopause. That's one of the tricky things, and we'll look at that. So her idda is 3 months. Okay? And that's why the commentator says, we limited being old by reaching the age of sin al-iyas, the age of where no more menstruation is reasonably expected. Okay? So that's what we can call legal menopause, not personal menopause. لأنه إذا كانت ممن تحين, because if she is someone who does experience hayd, فامتد طهرها, but she remains in a state of purity, فإن عدتها بالحيض, because then her idda remains with hayd, ما لم تدخل في حد الإياس, as long as she does not reach the age of iyas, of legal menopause, as explained in the Jawhar al-Niyara. Now, don't go around giving fatwa on this, because what if someone experienced early menopause? Does she have to wait 15 years to get remarried? Yeah. Don't give fatwa unless you're a mufti. وإن كانت حاملا فعدتها أن تضع حملها. So if she is pregnant, then her idda is, you just quoting the Quran, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, أن تضع حملها is for her to deliver her, the child she's pregnant with. Now what if she is not a free woman? وإن كانت أمة فعدتها حيضتان. For the amma, for the slave woman, her idda is 2 haids. وإن كانت لا تحيض فعدتها شهر ونصف. And she is of those who don't experience hayd, then in her case, her idda would be a month and a half. Now, we looked at 3 cases, right? She experiences hayd, she doesn't experience hayd, right? Due to being small or post PLM, post legal menopause. Third case is if she is pregnant. The 4th case is if the husband dies. Okay, let's leave this leave in a second. Same 4 apply. Right? وإذا مات الرجل عن امرأته الحرة. If the man dies, the man meaning, the husband dies, leaving behind a free woman. Okay? فعدتها أربعة أشهر وعشرة. Then her idda is 4 months and 10 days. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that in Surah Al-Baqarah verse 234. Okay? يتربصن بأنفسهن 4 أشهر وعشرة. Okay? And this is, of course, if he dies, leaving behind a free woman, there's a few here. دخل بها أو لا. This applies whether he consummated the marriage with her or not. Okay? This is a very important condition. Whether she صغيرة كانت أو كبيرة, whether she's small or old. مسلمة أو كتابية, Muslim or of the people of the book. حاضت في المدة أو لم تحض, whether she experienced hayd or not. وإن كانت أمة فعدتها شهران وخمسة أيام. If she is a slave woman, then her idda, if her husband dies, is 2 months and 5 days. Because الرق منصف, because the state of enslavement halves both, وإن كانت حاملا فعدتها إن تضع حملها. If the wife of the man who died, المتوفى عنها زوجها, the one whose husband had died, was pregnant, then her idda is that she deliver her child. Right? And this is from Surah Al-Talaq, verse number 4. I just need to pause for this for 1 second.
He's using a lot of the sharh. Maybe this will turn into a Libab class.
Happened to Minhaj.
Yeah, I know.
So it's 4 months, not 4 periods of. Yeah, because you don't have the commentary.
I have 2 copies of commentary if you want to grab one.
Shaykh Yusuf.
Someone that's easier to read.
Shaykh Yusuf doesn't have one.
Oh, pardon? He doesn't?
Yeah, he brought the wrong one.
Oh, you bought volume 1.
Maybe you can just give this to him, so you can have two volumes.
Or we could switch so that each of us has half the publishing house.
Does it explain in Johar? What was it?
Yeah, that was an interesting. I didn't get that issue.
Yeah, I don't understand that issue.
Yes.
So, I mean, because I mean, this translation says Quduri is menstruation, so it's tantamount to menstruation.
What?
Yes.
Quduri. So what is that? What is?
Because he says here, right?
Is
Or is the word used in
I have Nurul and one.
For menstruation.
So I think some madhabs say it means purity.
I don't understand it. So it can be both.
And then give the reasoning for why it's considered menstruation. There's 2 reasonings.
Can't you have a full tahur?
So
If you have a 9-day tahur?
The Johar was,
Yeah.
it goes on, فَإِذَّتُهَا ثَلَاثَةُ أَشْهُرٍ.
another reason you drink milk is that what's there.
Is it good? Always? So if she doesn't, if the person who doesn't experience hate because of being older or young, that's the exception.
Bismillah. So he says, وإن كانت وإذا ورثت المطلقة في المرض فعدتها أبعد الأجلين. Right? So if a woman inherits when divorced during al-marad, this is maradul maut, during the man's sickness, and this is referring to maradul maut, right, which is the state of sickness that resulted in the death. Right? So someone was in a state of, let's say, stage 4 cancer, and he divorced her during his final sickness. Okay? And they define the maradul maut quite specifically. Right? It's not just someone been dealing with diabetes for many years, and then they went to see the Zayn's marriage, and they overindulged in the ras malai, and they died. That's not marad al-maut. Right? The marad al-maut there would just be that final spike in blood sugar that knocked them out, right? But it's the final is the state of sickness to which the death is ascribed, right? And the danger, this is called talaq al-far, the talaq of the one fleeing responsibility for the wife. Why? If someone's dying, they say, okay, I have 3 young children who need support, and I have this awful wife. Okay, so what does he do? He divorces her. A few days before, he divorces her before dying. Why? So that she doesn't inherit from him. Okay? It's called طلاق الفار. That's the commentator I believe mentions. Right? إذا كان الطلاق فرارا من إرثها. Right? Right? So إذا ورثت المطلقة. Right? So she was divorced irrevocably. Right? فعدتها أبعد الأجلين. Then her idda is the furthest of the 2 potential waiting periods, which are عدة الوفاة and عدة الطلاق. The idda due for his death and the idda for her talaq. Right? Right? Either that she wait 4 months and 10 days from the time of death, right? Or, you know, the 3 waiting periods, right? And the reason being so that he not divorce her and she not inherit, right? Basically, right? That during the iddah, the woman would still inherit from her husband, right? So in her case, إذا ورثت المطلقة في المرض فعدتها أبعد الأجلين, which is either the iddah of the death, which is how long? 4 months and 10 days, right? Or the iddah of talaq, right? Which would be shorter, right? Because the reason being that if he divorced her 2 months before, let's say, before dying, then her iddah is still going on when the divorce takes place. Right? So in that case, which lasts longer, the iddah of hayd or the iddah of death? The iddah of death. But this, why? Because she was still, the link of marriage still existed, so there, you know, the consideration that she still has some marabit of zawjiyya, even in the case of the talaq al-ba'in, so the longer waiting period applies. And there's also the consideration of adam al-firar, not to flee from the responsibilities of that, which is coming up in its detail. And this is mentioned that this ruling applies, you know, that this إذا ورثت المطلقة, you know, the commentator puts ba'inan in the case of the talaq al-ba'in, because Alam al-Maydani mentions, quoting the Hidayah, that in the case of the talaq al-raj'i, what is due upon her is the iddah of death by consensus. Okay? So this is a small nuance. And we'll pause here for today. We'll continue class on our second scheduled date. I apologize. We'll stop here.